Hello. Welcome to my podcast. Yeah, probably not the best rendition of that song, but trying to have a little fun here. That was an Imagine Dragons song that was the theme of the movie Ralph Breaks the Internet. And I want to give a special shout out to my niece and nephew, David and Kylie, hoping they're going to enjoy this as they enjoyed the movie and as they're huge fans of Imagine Dragons. My guest today was one of the writers and directors of the film. He also wrote Zootopia as well as Wreck-It Ralph. And I just had a great conversation with him and really enjoyed it. Originally saw actually all three of those movies in the theater with my niece and nephew. And we had a blast. Fun rides. Wreck-It Ralph, the second one, Ralph Breaks the Internet, just they stepped it up. A lot of great gags. A lot of great visual features. It was just a lot of fun. So I rewatched that a few weeks before this conversation and enjoyed it as much on Netflix as I did seeing it in the theater with other audience members. Good times. Really enjoy animated features and the stories that are being told. And one of the cool things as we get into this conversation, we talk about the deeper themes. And I neglected to ask the question about the song, but one of the things that Phil had told, he responded to an email to give me a little of the background information, so my nephew would have a more understanding of how they choose songs in a movie. And Phil had said that he about a year before the movie came out, he met with members of the Imagine Dragons and pitched them some ideas and themes of what were going on in the film. And the second film was very much about Ralph's depression and self-doubt. And they had the song Zero, which was a loose song idea at the time and thought would be a good fit. So Phil gave them notes on a couple of lyrics that didn't quite fit fit a family film. And they had no problem changing a few of those lines. And he just said that they were really nice guys and very fun to collaborate with. Collaboration is a big thing, especially on animated films. Phil has different creative partners that he works with, talks a little bit about them, as well as numerous animators that he worked with. So I had a great time getting to know him, learning more about his influences, his process. It's just a fun conversation. I know you'll enjoy it. Special thanks to my sponsor for this episode, Dr. Mark Holland. Go to SoundCloud, check out the notes. You can find out information about his chiropractic clinics throughout the St. Louis area. On my website, on anywhere when you look at where you listen to your podcast, just look at those that description, and his information is there. You can find me on social media, kencalcaterra.com. Sign up for the mailing list. Reach out. Let me know what you think about the show. Always trying to improve it. Just really enjoy learning about about these art forms, these great artists, great business people, just all rock stars in their field. So I've had a blast bringing this to you. Thank you for listening, and here he is, Mr. Phil Johnston. Good morning, Phil. Thanks for taking out some time to chat and talk about your career and the great movies that you've created.
Happy to. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'd be remiss if I didn't send a shout-out to our mutual friend, Scott Sapelsa. He connected us, and I'm grateful for him doing that.
One of the all-time great guys, incredibly talented photojournalist, too.
Absolutely.
Known him over 20 years. Amazing. He's the best.
Yeah, no doubt about that. So over the years, I've enjoyed your movies. Mostly I watched them with my niece and nephew. And just a good time. But one of the cool things about the films, they're just so clever and smart that they serve both audiences, kids and adults alike. What is the challenge in crafting a movie like that to serve both audiences? What is the balance there?
I mean, I think that's you put your finger on sort of the key and the hardest part of it, where I think family films often underestimate the intelligence of kids, the emotional intelligence and their ability to kind of understand and process deeper subjects. Obviously, you're not going to use 4-letter words or talk about sex or anything like that in a family film. But, in the most recent Wreck-It Ralph movie, it's obviously a guy dealing with self-doubt and depression and codependence, and Zootopia dealt with bias. And I think for me, the key is that we're not ever going to, solve these problems, but if it can make a kid look at it and go, oh, I've felt that way, maybe I'm not alone. Or, like in the case of Zootopia, maybe a kid goes and asks his parents at the end of the movie, does that kind of thing happen in the world? What can we do about it? How do we make the world a better place? How do we, when we make a mistake like Judy the little bunny, how do we make that better with our friend? If we've exhibited bias or racism, how do we fix that? How do we own it? So I think to do that, back to your question, is super tricky because you don't want it to feel preachy. You don't want it to feel like so reductive that it's like a Saturday morning cartoon, and you don't want it to fly so high over the kids' heads that it feels, I guess, unattainable or unrelatable. So yeah, it's kind of a back and forth balance of typically I go too far over the line and then I'm pulled back. I'd rather, when approaching the material before it's seen by anyone, kind of go over the line and then have colleagues say, that's a bit harsh. How about we pull that back, you know?
Yeah. And that's, I guess it's one of the great things about having such great collaborators, getting that objective feedback, seeing how things work, playing through it. It's a blessing.
I mean, animated films in particular have this process at Disney and Pixar anyway, where you make the film kind of before anyone in the real world sees it. You make it 7, 8, 9 times, meaning you do just rough storyboard sketches, and I might do the voice of Ralph before John C. Reilly comes in and does it, just to see what it looks like, and you cut that together and do temporary music and all that stuff, and then you can show it to your colleagues, and it feels sort of like a movie, enough so that you can get a sense of, oh, this is not really working, this emotional story is failing, this joke isn't working, and whatever like that. So over a period of years that it takes to make an animated film, you can really test it out with your colleagues, which is invaluable.
Yeah, it's a fantastic process, and I think that's probably one of the reasons that animated movies are as good as they are, especially on the level of a Disney or a DreamWorks. I have a good buddy of mine. He's worked at both companies, as well as Marlon West. Marlon's amazing. I know I'm closer with his brother Tony, but I've had the pleasure of talking with Marlon, and just a great guy.
Marlon he's a giant. He's one of the great effects guys, which, the weird thing about animation, if you think about it, it's 100% effects. There's not one practical shot in animation. So the job Marlon and the people in that department, I haven't worked directly with him. He's done both the Frozen movies. He didn't do either of the Ralph movies or Zootopia. I don't think I didn't direct Zootopia, but I worked. He's always on the committee of folks that watch the movies and give really smart feedback.
Oh, that's fantastic. So looking, pretending to feedback. So last night I spoke with my nephew and a friend of his and my niece, and trying to get some points. And I said, I'm talking to one of the writers of a couple of the movies we've watched, and the director of Ralph Breaks the Internet. And they're like, whoa! So they were really jazzed. And my nephew's friend Kyle had mentioned, he loved that you had the two factions of Predators and Prey and Zootopia, and of course, everybody loves the sloth, but you guys definitely nailed the personality traits of the animals. It was just really well written. Is that another situation where you're going through the committee, you're talking about what these traits should be? How did all that come about?
So Zootopia was an interesting one in that I came in on that movie kind of late in the process, about a year or so before it came out, maybe a little less even. And the issue they were having was that it was feeling like it wasn't, like the movie was wanting to be about bias and racism, and a lot of research had been done on animal behavior and, you know, how does a fox behave? How does a rabbit behave? What are traits sort of inherent within those animals? But ultimately, what I thought about was more human behavior, because even though they are animals, it had to function as allegory for our world. And so without, you know, human wants and needs and things, that errors that humans make, especially again with regard to Judy Hopps, whose whole thing was, she wanted to go make the world a better place, and she never in a million years would have looked at herself and said, oh, I have bias. And so she had this sort of blind spot of bias that I don't know that you could say an animal would necessarily have, other than it's a survival instinct. And so to put the subtlety of human behavior into it, it was more looking at, well, what is unconscious bias, and how does that play out in human relationships? So that, weirdly, that is more how I approached it. Was, okay, we have these cool animals and we have animal behavior, but for people to relate to it, there has to be people behavior in it, you know?
Absolutely, and I think you guys accomplished that well with Judy's character, just her first day on the job, and how she was so eager to do such a great job and be the best officer, and then combining that with her being a bunny and just bouncing around. I just thought that was fantastic.
Yeah, and she was discriminated against, by the larger animals who said, "Oh, she's incapable. She can't do it." So you have gender politics. You have, in this case, a species that they didn't think was capable. So, women run up against that all the time in any number, certainly in the police force, but in so many jobs where men are just assuming that a woman can't do the job. So. Yeah, we bit off took a pretty big bite with that movie. A lot of issues.
Definitely, but yeah, it came out well, and it was. I've seen it a few times, and it holds up really well.
Oh, good. Yeah, I haven't seen it in a few years. Good to hear.
Yeah, how does that feel when you're watching your own work? I mean, is it something? I mean, some artists say, okay, it's done. I don't want to watch it. How do you go about that?
Kind of that. I think, again, when it's an animated movie, you're watching it dozens, hundreds of times, and there are so many iterations of it that by the end you're pretty sick of it. I mean, with each layer that's added, it becomes exciting again once it gets finished. When the lighting is, when the animation is obviously done and complete, it looks amazing, and then the lighting comes in and that looks amazing, and then the final score and the sound effects. So it gets additive each time, but then by the end, I'm just sort of exhausted. So yeah, I haven't watched any of those three, either of the Ralph movies or Zootopia, I don't think, Ralph 2 it's been a couple of years since it's out, so I don't know. I probably watched that one, I don't know, maybe 2 years ago or something. Or not even. So yeah, it's not that I don't like the movies. I'm just sort of tired of them by the end because I've seen them so many times.
Oh, absolutely. On a smaller scale, some of the projects I work on, same way. When I'm editing, I'm putting all this time in. But it's really interesting and a good feeling coming back to something after 3 or 4 years, and just it's a bit of a surreal experience. I almost forget, like, how did that come about? How did this turn out this way? I kind of forget about some of the steps, and at that point, it's just enjoying the art or the story.
That's cool.
Yeah,
where you can watch your work almost as a fan, or the way a regular audience member would, not with remembering how long it took to decide on a cut or something.
Yeah, so it's kind of like a little bit of a time warp, so that's kind of nice.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, you've written for both animation as well as live action. What are the differences in those processes?
I mean, on the page there is no difference. It's an animated script looks just the same as a live action script. You might have there's obviously more leeway in terms of flights of fancy you can take that are easier to do in animation than would be in live action, where it might break the budget. But I think the biggest difference is the collaborative process in animation and the iterative process, if you will, which is what I was describing, where you do it over and over and over again. And so, there might be the first draft of the film is the one you storyboard and you put up, and that's your first screening. And maybe it goes well, maybe it doesn't, and you might just throw out the entire script and start over. Whereas that doesn't typically happen, but it certainly has. Whereas in live action, my experience has mostly been of the movies that got made. Well, actually, that's only happened once with Cedar Rapids, where the script I wrote was pretty much the movie that got shot and made. Another one I did with Sacha Baron Cohen was more like animation, because he's someone that iterates over and over and over again. So, testing jokes and stuff like that. So, I guess for me, in a live action script, I've had, I guess I don't know. I've had better luck, I would say, at least with Cedar Rapids, in that what I wrote became the movie, with early drafts. But animation, it's almost more like running a TV show, where you have a series of writers in the form of storyboard artists who you're collaborating with, and the storyboard artists might come in and go, oh, this scene is written this way, but what if this character could fly, or what if there's a helicopter here, or whatever. So it's sort of the back and forth, where the writing is inspiring the art, and then the art is giving back to the writing, and then you go back and forth, kind of like that.
Oh, that's incredible. And there's just so many great artists that are working in animation. Truly. Always enjoyed my friend Steve Meyer. I just enjoy his stories and just talking about some of the directors he's worked with and things like that. That's always interesting to me. It's a great art form.
Totally.
Did you was that a dream of yours to work in animated films, or what was how did this come about?
No, it really wasn't. I love animation, but I don't love animation just because it's I don't love all animation, for instance. So to me, and this is something lots of people have said, I think Brad Bird says it all the time, which is, it's not a genre, it's a medium. So I wouldn't just look at an animated film necessarily and love it because it's animated. If it's a story I like and characters that I like, and there's innovation somehow, then I'm more likely to enjoy it, as opposed to just looking at a beautiful film that is simply beautiful but not a story I relate to. So, I had an abiding love of certain animated work, and certainly a great admiration for the artistry. But coming out of film school, which I was a journalist for 9 years. That's how I knew Scott Sapelsa. I worked in Rochester, Minnesota, Omaha, Des Moines, and then Minneapolis, which is where Scott and I met. And then when I was almost 30, decided to go to film school, which is a whole other story. But going to film school, coming out of there at Columbia in New York, I desperately wanted to make independent film, like smaller independent film, which along the scale of maybe Cedar Rapids or something like that. And the animation thing I kind of stumbled into in a weird way, where I had written this R-rated comedy that never got made, but that was my sample script, and someone at Disney read it, and it was about a kid that sells porn when he's in seventh grade, and which is the last thing you would think someone at Disney would go, oh yeah, teenage porn dealer. That's a great Disney film. However, they liked the characters and the comedy, and sort of there was an earnestness, even though it was an R-rated thing, the earnestness of the characters and the I guess truth of the characters, if you will. And from that, we're like, well, maybe you would actually be a fit with this guy, Rich Moore, who had been a Simpsons director and has sort of a left-of-center sensibility as well. And Rich and I met and really hit it off, and had a lot of the same reference points in terms of the work we loved, both animated and live action, and just comedians and stuff like that. And I was a huge fan of so much of the stuff he had done at The Simpsons, and then he did Futurama as well. So I was a big fan of the animation he had done, and we sort of then started working together and cooked up the idea for Wreck-It Ralph.
Oh, fantastic!
So, weird way of getting into Disney, in that I wasn't a super fan. I was, again, admired especially a lot of the early films, but I wasn't like a huge, I was in my early 20s in the kind of the second golden age when the musicals in the 90s came out. So I wasn't rushing to see those. I'd seen them, but they weren't my favorite films by any means. And so, we were kind of coming at the Disney thing from an outsider approach in a weird way.
Interesting. Yeah, that's one of the things my buddy Steve had told me when I had inquired when he was at Disney if he worked with you, and he hadn't, but he had mentioned like the early incarnation of Wreck-It Ralph was a little different than what we eventually saw. Was that a little edgier? Was it a little darker? Could you talk a little bit about that?
Well, because there was a video game movie that was attempted before Rich and I got there, which he may have been talking about. Okay. I don't know. It never saw the light of day. So I don't know if that might be what he's talking about. Because that was maybe a year or two before we got there. There was an attempt to make some sort of video game movie, but I don't know. Again, we knew it existed, but did not want to see it. Just we didn't want it to influence our work. So
understandable,
because our early, the very first draft of the script, the Jack McBrayer character, Fix-It Felix, was going to be the protagonist of the film, and we kept running into this thing where this guy, what does he really want, and what's the obstacle? And we kept coming up with, well, the bad guy of the game, the sort of this Ralph character, sort of a Donkey Kong-like villain in the game, is actually a much more interesting character because he's so broken. Mm-hmm. He's such a jerk, and everyone hates him. and that would be a much more interesting character. We did shift gears. But that was super early on in the process. That was, one of the, first drafts. So it's I'm not sure he would have necessarily seen that or not, but we did. Again, it's that iterative process where you just change stuff as you go.
And I think that's probably what he's referring to, somehow maybe heard about it, or at some point, the lore that goes through when you're at a building like that. I think that's a great choice because it's really interesting to understand how, somebody that is a villain, why they became a villain. And I think that's what makes that movie so interesting, because then we understand and the second movie went deeper into it. So, it wasn't like it was, this is Wreck-It Ralph again. It was just, you guys took the story to a completely new level in both the world that you created as well as just the character. So bravo to that.
Yeah.
I enjoy it.
Thanks. Yeah. I don't know who said it, but something that I always keep in mind is that the protagonist is the one who suffers the most. And so that, isn't necessarily how you would think about a film, but if you really put obstacles in front of your main characters, then the good guy or the lead is the one who has the most in the way and is the one who suffers the most in a weird way. So even though you love these characters, you really want to punish them if you're going to have a good story.
Absolutely. And just creating a world from something that's ones and zeros. And I'm sure that's part of the collaborative process with the animators and you and Rich and the rest of your team. I mean, that was just amazing. And that's another thing my nephew and his friend Kyle had talked about was like the pop-up ads. Like as they were walking through this world, there's all these pop-up ads and they both mentioned, my nephew's name is David. He'll get a kick out of hearing his name. But I'm trying to get that younger audience as well. But, educate these youngsters. But, they mentioned that they really love some of the shadiness of the ads, which is just like the internet. You'll get some ads that work for you, and then other ones it's just stay away.
Oh, yeah. That was one of my favorite characters in the sequel. Bill Hader did the voice, this guy named Spamley, J.P. Spamley, who, again, he's just a degenerate. He's just sort of a scumbag con artist, and thinking of, how do we, again, like in the first film, how do we personify video game characters? And like I was talking about with Zootopia, you have to approach them with human emotions for it to really resonate, even though it's 8-bit characters, and in the case of the internet, digital creations. And so, what would spam look like other than spam? Whatever. So, what would a spamming email or a pop-up guy look like, and what would he be like, and what would his persona be in it? Not that there's anything wrong with used car dealers, God bless them, but it was sort of that idea that he was this shifty kind of dirtbag that lived in a weird, dark place in the internet, and some of the stuff he was doing wasn't completely legal or above board, and I love characters like that. Even in my real life, I love weirdos. So, not that I want to spend all my time with them, but they make good characters for sure.
Absolutely. And then he had that, the redemption towards the end where he tries to save Ralph, and of course the physics of everything. Ralph just burst right through his car, that gag never. I love that gag. I can't remember if that's a good example of the storyboarding process, and I can't remember honestly where that particular idea came from, but we had this thing, well, maybe Spamley's going to save him, and then wouldn't it be better if Spamley tries to save him and then just fails miserably? That feels more like Spamley. Yeah. So it might have been Jim Reardon, who is another legend of The Simpsons, just a great director, and he's our head of story, which is the person who oversees the storyboard artists, and he worked on all 3 movies with us as well, and an incredibly funny guy and so smart. So a lot of the kind of physical comedy gags come out of his brain. I don't remember for certain if that was him, but seems like something Jim would come up with. Right on. And then with Ralph, you pays homage to many elements of pop culture. One of the things that I noticed, of course, you have towards the end when you have the virus monster of Ralph, you get a little King Kong in there, and I kind of saw, to me, it touched upon the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. So that. Oh
yeah, for sure. King Kong obviously is referenced there in just the the climbing of the building and the Vanellope sort of as a tiny Fay type character. We watch so many movies to reference that. There are Godzilla elements, all of those kind of early monster movies that we all grew up watching. Stay Puft, yeah, for sure. I mean, I suspect Stay Puft also has references back to King Kong also, so it's we're all fishing in the same pond.
Right on. What are some of your influences growing up? What'd you watch? What do you love?
When I was a kid, my dad was an Episcopal priest, and one of his parishioners was an executive at the Marcus theater chain in Wisconsin where I grew up, and so we had a free pass to go to the movies. So I went to the movies basically every week growing up, the Neenah Theater in Neenah, Wisconsin, which is now torn down. But so I was kind of a little agnostic in my movies. Whatever happened to be playing there, I would go see. So I remember, for instance, absolutely loving On Golden Pond when I was a little kid for some reason.
Yeah,
the Henry Fonda, Jane Fonda movie, that there was just something emotional about it that I was like 8 years old, and I just remember feeling emotion for the first time in a movie that I didn't fully understand, and really, it really resonated with me somehow. Of course, Star Wars and all of those movies. I was a huge fan of the original Star Trek series. I watched that religiously when I was a kid. As I got a little older, I started getting really into comedy, and so we would, when I was too young, would watch Caddyshack and Stripes and those kind of cornball 80s comedies that are funny in my memory and don't necessarily hold up if you watch them again.
Yeah.
Or maybe not at all.
Yeah.
But those were things like Strange Brew, the Bob and Doug McKenzie movie.
That was one of my favorites growing up, yes.
Oh, my God. I must have watched that 50 times.
Me too.
To where that was my friends and I would just, I think if we're of a certain age, watching those on VHS and just watching them over and over again. Yeah. Caddyshack, Stripes, Strange Brew, as I got older, then got into Coen Brothers and like that. So just a sort of wide range of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember growing up, my grandmother would always, during the summertime, my cousin would come visit. He was out of state, he was in Wyoming, so he'd come visit, and that was my grandmother would take us to a slew of movies. My dad and my grandma would always pack this big purse, and she'd pop her own popcorn and all that, which is,
nice.
Not good if you're the theater chain, but, stretch that dollar.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but those were just incredible times. It was just so magical. The movies were just so magical.
Yeah, and now, I mean, it's very weird not being able to go to the movies for me, but the kind of cool thing there's nothing cool about the pandemic, let's be clear, but the thing that has been sort of nice has been I've been able to watch a ton more movies with my kids. So showing them E.T. and, Back to the Future and Big, sort of a lot of those, the family films of that era. It kind of goes back to your original question, like how do you balance stuff kids would like versus what adults would like? And if you watch E.T. now, that is, I mean, it's dealing with some very adult themes. There's profanity a little bit. There's a divorce. There's infidelity where the husband is off in Mexico with his secretary or something like that. They're heavy duty themes that no one at that time, and granted, we also didn't wear seatbelts in the back of cars and people were smoking, but no one was questioning the idea that kids could handle that kind of thing. Obviously we change and evolve, but those movies, that one anyway, certainly holds up.
Oh yeah, yeah, and that's one of the things Spielberg wanted to accomplish with that, being a child of divorce. I mean, that was a big theme for him, and it came across well. And having that friend being separated, we saw that in the theater, I think 3 or 4 times. I remember bawling every time.
Yeah. Same. Yeah.
I haven't seen it in a while, and I'm sure that it'll open up the floodgates again. So I need to revisit.
It holds up, and it's fun watching films that are 20, 30, 40 years old or older, where the pacing is much more sort of languid, and it's not as in your face as the explosions and stuff. My son is 8, and he particularly loves. He said, "I wish all movies were in black and white," and I think he likes just that that it's not so fast paced, and it's like the original back to the original King Kong is one of his favorite films because it's great, and it's there's a sort of DIY element to it where you can kind of see how the effects work, and I think that's fun for a kid to think, I can imagine using a puppet or whatever to make a movie that way. It gives him anyway great joy seeing films like that.
Yeah, so those Ray Harryhausen films. I mean, Jason and the Argonauts. Seeing those growing up, those were just incredible. It was amazing. What a great experience watching those.
I know that he was just legendary, and those films we've watched a couple of them and with my kids, and again it's sort of, they kind of laugh because it's campy and they can tell that it's effects, but explaining like, no, that was back then, just imagine that was cutting edge, that was unprecedented, so yeah, it's a great privilege to be working in this medium.
Absolutely. And just in looking back, I mean, with YouTube, everything's little snippets. So just it's refreshing to hear you say that your son is into something that's long form, that's a little slower pace, that it gives you a chance to breathe, to really reflect. And I showed my nephew MASH this summer. And
cool.
It was one of the movies we watch. He just loves he wants to stay up all night watching movies, which I did that when I was a kid, so that's cool. And
how old is he?
He is 14 now.
Okay.
So the fact that he really dug MASH and could sit there and just soak it in that was cool. So I felt that was a proud uncle moment there.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm wondering, that's probably a little mature for my 8-year-old, but maybe I'll ease him into Altman with Popeye or something.
Yeah, most definitely.
Oh, I hated Popeye when I was a kid. I haven't rewatched it, but I did not like it for some reason. I wonder how that holds up.
I have it on DVD, but I haven't watched it in years, and I think I was kind of indifferent as a kid, but then when I went to film school, just learning more about Altman, it was just one I picked up, and it's been probably 20 years since I watched it, so I'll watch that with my nephew as well, see what he thinks, and I'll have to let you know how it holds up.
Yeah, you'll be the canary in the coal mine.
There you go. Also, the Capra films, I like It Happened One Night and Arsenic and Old Lace, just the snappy dialogue of those. I'm gonna have to revisit those as well.
And Capra, I think, is great because there's like this sweetness and optimism to him, but look at It's a Wonderful Life. It opens with a friggin' suicide attempt, like that's, and everyone thinks, oh, Capra's all sunshine and rainbows, but that would never happen in a studio film today, where I don't think it would anyway, where this very dark stuff is going on, and the world is dark, and I think some of movies, the point of it is it should be escapism, but it's also like there's probably a way to incorporate the darkness and the light in the world and give people hope amid the dark, as opposed to just being pure escapist, Drek, which is, I think, a lot of what, not to sound like a curmudgeon, but I think that's what a lot of movies are today.
Yeah, well, it's the yin yang, how can you have good without evil? It's just, that whole philosophy. So it's just, we're back to finding that balance.
Yeah, totally. Exactly.
Yeah. So you received the honor of an Academy Award nomination for Ralph Breaks the Internet. That was your debut as a director, correct?
Yeah. Yep. Of features for. Yep. Sure was.
Yeah. So how was that, sharing that honor with Rich Moore and Clark Spencer? I mean, is it true? Everybody says it's an honor to be nominated, which, I mean, that's huge. But how do you feel about that and that statement that you always hear, or was that one of those things like, oh, we were so close?
No. I mean, in that case, it was. I would say that is absolutely accurate. That we knew pretty clearly that the Spider-Verse movie was going to win, because it was sort of just critically beloved, and our movie did well, but that one you could kind of tell had just captured the imagination in a way that that it just didn't seem like we were really in the running that year. So we were able to go, this is great, this is really fun, we're super proud of this movie, and now we can just go and enjoy the night with no pressure, because not to be a Debbie Downer, but there was no chance really we were going to win. So yeah, in that regard, it was just a blast, and
cool.
Just knowing, all right, that will always be still a movie I love, and it doesn't matter if it wins that award or any award or not. But that's that little certificate of nomination is still pretty cool. So
absolutely,
yeah. And I was there when I went to the ceremony when Zootopia won. So even though I wasn't on the stage, that was weird, more nerve-wracking in a way, because I knew it had a chance, and I thought it might win, but I wasn't sure. So I was more nervous for Zootopia, because there was just no chance Ralph 2 was going to win.
Interesting, but that level of awareness is great, where you could just enjoy that night, and the team, experiencing that with the people you did. I think that is probably one of the greatest joys, at least what I've had when I've shared, some accolades with others and those creative partners. That to me, that just means the most.
Without question, yeah. I mean, it's. As you know, it's a very long process, and it's fraught at times, and it's difficult. And so, to get to the end and be there hanging out with your buddies in that auditorium, and seeing all the actors and famous people that you admire, it's surreal, but also just this feels good. This is great. I'm glad we're here.
Very cool. And then working with Rich, you coming into animation and Disney for the first time, and having him, as a mentor, as a guide. What did you learn from him just coming into animation as someone new?
Well, I mean, he's a terrific director of comedy, and his timing is great, and he's maybe the most we worked really closely together in editing the film, and in editing storyboards, and getting the storyboard reels up and running, and just finding ways to make a joke work better with a cut or a frame, or whatever. He's Rich, and Jim Reardon too, going back to Jim, both are just real students of comedy, and not just animation, but Laurel and Hardy and the Marx Brothers and Chaplin, and going back to that, and Sullivan's Travels, and the films of the 30s and 40s. Jim Reardon especially just has this almost unhealthy knowledge of cinema from that era.
Wow.
And so the reference points are just really interesting, and both of those guys are just a wealth of knowledge, and of course have tons of experience too. But I'd say just the cutting of comedy was a big thing. Rich and I were coming into it sort of together, though, in that he hadn't done a feature animated. He had worked on the Simpsons movie, but hadn't directed a feature film. So we were in those early months of Ralph. We're both sort of flailing around, goofing off, kind of finding our way together in terms of what the story was going to be, and like that. He's been a great a great partner through the years.
Oh, that's fantastic. And one of the cool things, we talked about Disney being a well-oiled machine, and you have the different departments. Talk about just what a day is when you're in it. I know you have production managers and producers that are handling the schedule and keeping things flowing. Talk about just, some of those days are chaotic. You're going from meeting to meeting, story meeting, animation, talking with animators. Just touch upon that if you would.
Yeah, so, when the movie is really, really at its peak, there are as many as 500 people working on it. So I'll just jump to sort of the last, say, 3 or 4 months of the process, in which case, there are nonstop meetings, starting with, if maybe spend an hour with the editor in the morning, where you're some new storyboards have come in and you're recutting a scene, and maybe within the editorial booth you're like, that doesn't really work. Let's change this and redo that. And then one of the storyboard artists is just sitting there on this device called a Cintiq, which is, it's essentially just a digital sketch pad, which, they can redraw the boards and then email them kind of to the editor, and then the editor will cut in the new boards, but there might need to be a different piece of dialogue. So I get behind the mic and do Ralph's voice, and okay, we're going over here now, and come on, kid, don't do that. That's ridiculous. And, whatever.
Wow.
And then then the editor cuts that in, and we look at that with the new boards. All right, that's good. And then maybe we would then go to animation dailies, which it's just like watching dailies of a live action film, where the animators are showing their work, and it might be, just a handful of shots from a scene, and you're looking at the work and going, okay, in this case, he looks too angry. Rather than have Ralph scowl there, why don't you have him grimace? Or you're making adjustments just the way you would with an actor. Trying to, I was taught in film school talking action verbs, but in some cases might get up and act out how you want it to look, or, what if he tried this, and you get up and sort of bumble around or whatever. So from there you might go to, the layout, which is from storyboarding, it goes to layout, which is the process of, it looks like animation, but it doesn't have the acting. It doesn't have the, it's more robotic in the movement. It's basically blocking. And so the characters are moving around in a digital space, and you're moving the camera how you want it to move. So working with the cinematographer in the layout department, so that might be a couple hours or an hour. And then you might go to technical animation, which is how the hair and the cloth moves, and stuff like that. And then maybe it's effects. In that big King Kong Ralph thing at the end of the film, there were so many effects because there were over 1 million Ralphs, individual Ralphs in that giant thing, and if you look at it, there are these, when he gets angry, it gets really red, and there's these little arcs of lightning within there. That's all effects. And, there's debris that gets, when a building is smashed, there's debris and there's fire and all kinds of stuff. So, every detail someone is responsible for. And so when the movie is in full production, it's just nonstop, and it takes this massive team to get it done. So, yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, very cool. And then how do you balance out those crazy times? How do you balance out family life with your work? I mean, I know at times when you're in the last 3 months, I'm sure you're not seeing your family much, but where is that balance? The years of making that movie, it was pretty tough. I have 2 little kids, and I wasn't around a lot, and we're having meals often at work where the meals are catered, which is great. But my family, my wife Jill and my 2 kids would sometimes come over to Disney and eat there with me, or come for lunch or whatever. But there were a lot of weekends worked, and a lot of long hours, and a lot of missed vacations and all that. That's sort of, unfortunately, the nature of it. So a lot of sacrifices made on, and my wife kind of shouldering a lot of that. That's what a friend of mine had made the statement. That's why it's important to marry well.
Yeah, so, exactly.
Balance that part of life out.
Yeah, and the old Disney, the joke was, if you don't want to work on Saturday, don't even bother coming in Sunday.
Yeah, one more. I want to touch on one more thing in Wreck-It Ralph, and then I have a couple other questions. Are you doing okay on time?
Yeah, yep, I'm fine. The phone keeps buzzing with political donors or people asking. Yeah. I'm sure asking for political donations, but yeah, I'm good.
Yeah, I turn mine off to avoid those distractions because I'm getting a lot of that. It's you donate once and volunteer a little bit. Yeah, then you're on the list. But
oh yeah, totally.
Yeah, that's cool. But yeah, John C. Reilly was just as the voice of Ralph was just incredible. I mean, he just really that voice just really embodied that character.
Oh yeah.
Did you guys envision him when you were crafting the screenplay and the story, or did he come along later?
We had the idea for John pretty early, like before he had committed to it. In fact, John was also in Cedar Rapids, another movie I wrote, and I was on the set of Cedar Rapids and asked him if he would consider doing the voice of Ralph, because we were thinking about him for it, and he was actually very difficult to get him to commit to doing it. There was something where he had always heard from, like, he's friends with Jack Black, and had heard from Jack Black that it's basically, for animation, you're just in a dark room, by yourself, not acting against anyone, and not, that it's basically just you alone. He's like, why would I do that? I'm an actor because I like to react. I like to bounce off of people. And so we met with him I met with him and Rich one time, or a couple times, and then Rich met with him individually a couple times, and basically convinced him it doesn't have to be that way. We can get you together with Sarah Silverman in the same room, and it'll be, you'll be behind a mic, but the chemistry will be real, and as much as possible we'll record that way. And so that became the new norm for the movie, where almost every scene that they were in, they would record together, and Jack McBrayer and Jane Lynch would record together, and it's better, it's simply a better way of working. And so I think John once he committed, he really committed, and he knew Ralph inside and out, and really embodied that character. And I can't imagine anyone else doing that voice. I really can't. And so yeah, we got lucky in that he finally gave in and
oh, that's fantastic. Yeah. And you nailed the impression when we were doing that earlier. That was fantastic.
Yeah, I when I first met John, again, it was on Cedar Rapids, and it's like, I like you. We're both jagoffs. That's, I go, oh, cool, I guess. You know, he's a Chicago guy, and I'm from Wisconsin, so we apparently share a jagoffery that is our secret language.
Oh, that's fantastic. And then, so Cedar Rapids in 2011, that was your first big budget opportunity. How did that manifest?
It was sort of born out of frustration with a number of films that I had sold and written, a couple of movies and TV show that sold but never got made, which, you know, is something that happens a lot in Hollywood. Is, you know, you might sell a script or a pitch or whatever, and then it just goes into this development hole and it never gets made. So I was really frustrated. I'm like, why the hell am I just keep doing this crap? And why don't I just write something that I want to write and then see if I can get it made? And so I just wrote it kind of with Ed Helms in mind. He was a friend. We had met through a mutual friend, and I wrote it with Ed in mind, and you know, finished the script and sent it to him, and he loved it. And it just happened to coincide with The Hangover. I don't think it had come out quite yet, but The Hangover, you know, went on to become this massive phenomena for the time that it was when it was out. And so Ed was a bankable movie star as a result of that, and we were able to put that movie together pretty quickly with just the stars aligned in a way that rarely happens. But yeah, that's how it came about.
Yeah, I hadn't seen that in a while. I enjoyed it, and that's another one I have to revisit. There's so many great stories out there, and that's hard to find the time to enjoy them all.
Oh my
God!
And
work and everything else. So, but
we have so many streaming services and the Criterion Channel and HBO Max and I could watch movies for the rest of my life and never see a fraction, only see a fraction of what exists.
Yeah. So on Cedar Rapids, Alexander Payne was a producer, and you learned from him the power of saying no, and I don't know if we'd say that's the subtle art of saying no, or, you know, I'm stealing that from a book that I've enjoyed. That's the subtle art of not giving an F. Try not to curse, so we get the keep the family theme here. But talk about that power of saying no, and I guess staying true to something that you believe in.
Yeah, it's. I mean, I think it's served me well in terms of the projects I've done for the most part. It's really just that exactly what you just said. It's staying true to what you believe in, the kinds of films or shows you would want to watch, and kind of trusting your instincts about something that feels crummy, something that is either going to lead to a bad movie or a terrible experience. And so the more, you know, I look at a lot of writers and directors who have 20 things in development, and I wonder, well, do you really care about all of those? It's not possible.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah.
I really try to care deeply about what I do, and it leads to me being, I'm sure, less prolific than I might otherwise be, but I invest myself thoroughly in whatever I'm working on, to the point where it becomes almost an obsession. And that may inform it as much as anything, why I say no to things, because I'm not capable of multitasking to the degree some people are. But I do think, what's the point? It's really hard. Like, doing this work is I mean, it's not saving lives or anything, but it's hard work, and people are nasty and unpleasant often, and are telling you suck, and so you damn well better be invested in the idea, because it's going to be a long, ugly, bumpy road to get to the end. And if it's something you only half care about, then what is the point? You know. So
yeah, no doubt.
It's I think it's a good word. No.
Yeah, it can be. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And I find as I get older, it's easier to say no. It's easier to set boundaries, things like that. And I realize my time is limited, so what do I want to spend it on? So
exactly, totally, yeah.
Not like in this pandemic, I've spent it, the most wisely. I probably could have done some different things, but there's that balance again. So hopefully I lived in the balance. Talking about so your early career, you almost had a decade in broadcast journalism, and we won't get too deep into that. But I had read that that was, I mean, and just the news is just so negative these days, and I can see how that was something that was very taxing on you. It's a heavy burden just watching the news and watching current politics and everything else. It's wearing me out. But how did that career, help in your writing? Because I find that having those different life experiences can really help you understand the characters better, the psychology, things like that, when you're directing the emotion. How did all that help you?
I think you're right in that meeting all these different people every day, it might be, I can think of stories Scott Sapelson I shot with this 80-year-old lion tamer who had this weird, pre-Tiger King, obviously, this was in the 90s, but strange backyard circus, and this guy played a musical saw, and this guy, this 80-year-old named Wilbert Bain, ate fire, and he had tigers in his backyard, and, horrible from an ASPCA standpoint, in retrospect, but a fascinating character. And it might be that guy one day, and then, there's a house fire the next day, and this family's just lost their home, and how awful is that? And it's that weird thing where you are given, and I again use the word privilege, the privilege of telling people's stories, and that so you're meeting just a vast swath of humanity, and that does nothing but inform, at least my relationship with people, or my understanding of people, and like you said, the psychology of people, and what the hell did happen to make that guy want to make a circus in his backyard, and what made this guy want to kill someone, and what made that guy become a soybean farmer or a commercial fisherman or whatever. So I'm really grateful for those years that I did that. Even though it would be awesome to be 10 years younger and, be at where I'm at in my career now. But, I was able to, I think, use that work to inform the work I'm doing now. And I'm also really glad I'm not doing that now, because to your point, it's awful. The news is horrible. And it would be so hard to keep up with the people are constantly clicking to find what's the new story. It's been 4 minutes. There's not a new headline. What am I going to do?
Yeah.
I don't know how journalists are functioning right now. I really don't. And boy, I'm glad I'm not doing it.
Yeah. The whys of everything are fascinating, but now just the culture of, I want to scoop everyone. And so it's a culture of headlines where you don't really have the substance. And that's why I enjoy the long-form journalism, where I can learn more. I can learn more about those characters. I can better understand them. But in a lot of these articles and things that you click on the internet, it's it's just not a lot of substance. You don't get the full story. A lot of times you may not get the correct story, and that to me is scary.
It's terrifying, and it's sort of choose your own adventure in terms of what
doubt.
we're all watching anyway. Choose your own truth. It's a very strange moment in time that feels like we haven't quite figured out how we're going to function with the technology we're living with.
Yeah, and hopefully that's something that evolves and we figure it out and it just doesn't spell our doom. But
yeah, if not, we're all dead, and so I guess there's that too.
Yeah, humans are resilient, so hopefully, like the stories that you're telling and things like that will give us enough to reflect and say, okay, we need to go a little here. But that's why it's refreshing that with sharing these things with your son, with my niece and nephew, and this younger generation, I think is important. And that's what I like about this podcast format. We can get a little deeper. We can talk about these things. And
what an incredible resurgence of basically radio. It's amazing.
Absolutely. A few more questions for you. So you did the career in journalism. You took that. You jumped back into film school, which was a risk. I mean, that was a little later, but at a pretty good age. And that was one of the stories Scott had told me. And I don't know what brought it up. Maybe I was talking about some different ideas. And as I'm getting older, thinking like, is there still a chance? And he had he had said, oh yeah, look at my friend Phil Johnston and what he has done and this and that. And I thought, oh, okay, cool. At some point he'd be a great podcast guest. So you went to New York, and you had some great mentors there, and then afterwards you created your short films. Was this before film school or after film school? I don't have the timeline down.
In film school, I made dozens and dozens of short films and worked on. I'm sure over 100 in the years I was there. We work on each other's stuff and are shooting constantly. So whether direct writing and directing, and I was a DP on a lot of them and produced a bunch and stuff. So was just constantly making work while in school. So I think all of the short films I made were at Columbia, and then immediately after Columbia to make money, I made a handful of industrial videos and public service announcements for and stuff like that. But all the short films were at Columbia.
Great. And with that, I guess the long way to get to here. I was rambling a bit, but as far as a short film being a calling card, I guess this is advice to young filmmakers. You feel, and I guess it's whatever realm you want to get into, whether directing or producing. I guess what's the best advice you have for a young filmmaker who may want to break into Hollywood? I think young or old, I think the idea of, if you're a writer, to write a script that is really personal. And I'm staffing a show right now that will be on Netflix eventually, and I'm reading a bunch of stuff, and I'm more likely to respond to something that feels like it's really coming from the voice of someone that is being honest and truthful on the page. And I sometimes it's great to read something that's just straight up hilarious and the jokes are funny and crisp, but I would look for something that's just honest and raw and vulnerable, because I think that takes more guts than just writing jokes. So that's one thing. And then as far as making stuff goes, it's so accessible now. I mean, Soderbergh has made a handful of things on an iPhone, there's no reason. I mean, my daughter is 10 and edits on iMovie and is pretty fluent in that software, and it's easy. So, I would say just make stuff. And if you want to get into this
medium, probably try to make something that's narrative, not just a funny TikTok video, although that's something too.
Yeah.
But, you know, a 5-minute short or a 2-minute short just that shows I know how to move the camera and I know how story works and I can work with actors a little bit. And, you know, a short film is really basically a joke. Even if it's a drama, it's still a setup and a payoff. And if it's 5 minutes, there's not much more time to do anything other than that. So I think I made the mistake in film school of making a movie that was like 22 minutes long, and I wanted to show what I could do, so I kind of incorporated a bunch of different genres, and I had explosions, and I had sort of a helicopter shot, and you know, before there were drones, and all kinds of stuff like that. And the movie did well for me. However, you know, if you're looking to get programmed in festivals, shorter is usually better.
Absolutely.
And if you can make a poppy 5-minute film or a 8-minute film, that's going to be better, just generally speaking, than and from a purely sort of mercenary practical standpoint than a super long film, which even again I feel like that movie I made, my thesis film, was a good calling card, but it was still too long.
Yeah, I made the same mistake. I think mine was about 22 minutes as well, and it was a great experience. It really solidified that I could direct, but yeah, it's just hard to program. So I mean, my thought is under 10 minutes is a pretty good rule of thumb.
Yeah, but yeah, the advice would just be go make it, make stuff, constantly be making stuff. There's just no reason not to with. Whether it's iMovie or Final Cut or whatever you use, it's all affordable, and everyone has a phone pretty much at this point. So there are no more excuses, which has led to a great democratization of the medium, and it's also led to a lot more crap being produced. But that's okay. You take the good with the bad.
Yeah, definitely. A couple more questions. One of the mistakes that I've made in the past, and that I think a lot of young filmmakers do, as far as rewriting. So a lot of times it's a first draft, and let's go film it, and it's great to make things, and it's great to collaborate. But so often, I think many films or independent films are DOA because the script is not there, and I've made that mistake. And but you had an interesting philosophy on rewriting that I picked up on the internet. Talk about that a little bit.
I mean, the idea that writing is rewriting, basically, and I'm certainly not the first person to say that, but it is a painful but needed part of the process. Where I would give yourself time to finish something and then set it aside for a minute so you can look at it objectively, then return to the work and be able to go, oh, that character arc is no good, or that this scene is totally unnecessary, and like that. And then additionally, I think it's important to get your friends and collaborators to read and be honest and sort of brutal with you in a nice way, so that you're really beating the script up, and you're pushing on it as hard as you can, and you're not letting any stone go unturned, basically, because if you you have a great camera move and some cool effects and an interesting performance, if the script is crap, it's not gonna make any difference, So the rigor really needs to come before you start shooting, and read it out loud with your friends. Just do a table read with non-actors. It doesn't matter. Hearing it out loud is a huge help. So that's something I would always recommend. And find a couple people that you trust and who are trying to do the same thing, who are going to be honest with you and not just say, oh yeah, that's great, it's awesome. It's much easier to say it's awesome than to sit down and spend 2 hours giving notes to somebody. So you want those people. You need those people.
Oh yeah, and that's where my friend Steve Meyer, the animator, he's so great when he gives so many notes, and it's fantastic. It's just so good because it's so much. It's painful when you get those notes after you've spent the time and money to and the hundreds of hours to craft that piece of cinema. And then like, oh yeah, this character, I wasn't really feeling this, or why did he say that? And it's just like so much easier to do that in the early phases of script writing. So yeah, excellent advice. Thank you. For sure. The last question that I have written is, with me, sometimes I get some ideas pop into my head. It just off times when I'm riding my bicycle is a great time just to shut down, and it's amazing how many ideas pop into my head, or finding clarity in an idea. And it's, hobbies can be that way. Sometimes just disconnecting just allows this flow of creativity. What is that for you? What do you do to get away that may, in fact, just really energize your creativity?
I mean, similarly, like running, I often will get ideas while running, and I can brainstorm with myself that way, or going for a walk. Really, it can come from anywhere. David Lynch has this thing he says about ideas just being fish in the sea, and that you just have to know how to catch them, kind of, that they're out there just sort of floating around, swimming around. And I kind of think that's true. You need to pay attention to even dumb ideas and get used to writing them down. I used to carry around a little notebook with me all the time, and now I mostly do it in notes on my iPhone. But like dumb ideas, dumb pieces of dialogue, a name, a title, just ideas that might float through your head that you might just think of as daydreaming, but might actually be this really fertile idea. And I think you can't ignore those. You have to. It's like a muscle. You have to train yourself to learn to pay attention to those things and really treat it as, almost as an anthropologist or a journalist or something, where you're going to examine this thing rather than just letting it float by. Because everyone has ideas, I think, and it's how you cultivate them that makes a difference between people who just have ideas and people who actually take them and craft them into something meaningful. And it's great to. It would be awesome to go away to a cabin in the woods and do some amazing thing. But the artist Chuck Close has this quote. I'm paraphrasing, but it's something like, "Inspiration is for amateurs. The rest of us just show up and do the work."
Oh, that's a good one.
I really like that because it means it is work, and it's not this sort of fanciful life of an artist where you're just floating in space and doing this wonderful work. It's hard, and it means putting your nose down and doing it. And that's the case with anyone who makes anything, that it requires hard work, and you need to just show up and do the work. So that's kind of how I approach it, it's a pretty Midwestern approach, sort of work-a-day approach to it. But I find that that's helpful.
Incredible advice. Well, that's all I have. Is anything you want to add?
I don't know. I don't think so. I mean, I think if it's about people finding the time to make work, that's always a challenge. But it's to some extent about sacrifice. I think if you really love film or writing or directing, I think you just have to make it a part of your life. Like I define myself as much by my career as anything, which could be considered unhealthy, but it's actually just what I want to do. It's what I love. And so if you love it, find a way to do it, I think.
Well, Phil, this has been an absolute treat. I really appreciate you taking out the time to chat with me.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. Thanks for having me.
Well, great. Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, this was a lot of fun. I think there's a lot of great, the talking points in there. So yeah, I think people will enjoy it. So
Cool.
yeah, I'll have it out. I'll let you know. It'll be a few weeks. I've got a little bit of a backlog, but yeah, I'll let you know when it comes out. Are you on social media?
I'm not.
That's
at all.
That's a good thing.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'll send you a text or whatnot and let you know. And if there's any other colleagues or anybody else that if the experience you find is good and you like the end product, I mean, I'm always looking to expand, and I find that the networking approach and those connections.
Yeah, totally.
To me, this is all about connections to the work. Of course, was one that really interested me in this conversation. Of course, the connection with Scott. So yeah, to me, life is all about the connections. So
yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'll think who else might be good to talk to. I know a handful of people I think would be interesting.
Well, I appreciate it. Yeah, thanks again, and yeah, I'll let you know, and I'll have to take Scott out to lunch for connecting us. Really, he's such a good dude.
Oh, he is. He's the best. One of my favorite people.
All right, Phil. Well, thanks again, and enjoy the rest of your day.
All right, thanks, Ken.
All right,
talk to you. Bye.